All right.
Okay.
Good evening. 6:30. This is the meeting of the City of Walker Planning Commission for January 20,
That's a song.
2020.
Thank you.
We'll call the meeting to order. Our first item of business is reviewing the minutes from the January 6, 2020.
Tom, you're not froze up. We can hear you.
Gary, I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Support, Scott.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Scott, to approve the minutes of the meeting from January 6. Are we going through roll call vote on these? Tricia?
For the minutes,
No.
no.
Okay, that being the case, if there's someone that is not in a, all those in favor of approving the minutes indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is an opportunity for general public comment. This is an opportunity for people to raise questions or concerns about agenda items. So if there's anyone out there that wish to speak on something other than what's on the agenda this evening, which is the Aloft Hotel.
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
If you wish to offer your public comment, please raise your, there's a opportunity to put your hand up either on the screen or with your identity, and Jason will recognize you and allow you to speak. Is there anyone who would wish to speak?
Not seeing anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Okay, we'll move to the next item on the agenda. This is an item that was tabled from the December 16 meeting involving the Aloft Hotel Towneplace Suites by Mariott at 2864 Walker Avenue. This is a final area site plan. Again, it was tabled. We would need a action initially to take the item off the table.
I'll make that motion, Terry.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Jason, to remove it from the table. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried with one in opposition. At this point, I'll turn it over to Tricia Anderson, our planning director, to bring us up to date.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second here. Okay, so we're back considering the Aloft Hotel Towneplace Suites at 2689 Walker Avenue. Again, this is for the final area site plan tabled on January 6, 2021. And so you are being asked tonight to review the final area site plan for Aloft Hotel and Towneplace Suites and to provide a approval with or without conditions, denial, or tabling of the request. Again, this lot size is 5.21 acres. It's part of the Meyer commercial PUD. And we have Jason Vander with us and potentially somebody from Bosch Architecture. I left some of these slides from my last presentation just to refresh your memory. And so again, the property is situated behind the Meyer gas station parcel. The developer also owns the Baymont Inn, which is just to the north of where this hotel is being proposed. The hotel chain is owned by Mariott. And there's currently one other location for Aloft Hotel, which is in Detroit in Michigan. And there are 2 Towneplace suites in the greater Grand Rapids area. So once again, here is the architectural renderings. And again, this is this is one site, 2 hotels, technically 1 building. Again, here's the subject site. This is the vicinity map situated directly behind the Meyer gas station. Surrounding zoning, surrounded by commercial PUD and light industrial. And so this is a snapshot of the revised plan. And so I plan on going through some items that the applicant did provide to us. And then we'll get into some other items that will still need to be addressed. With the revised submittal, we received some revised facade materials. They were also able to provide us with a signage summary that we asked for so that everything could be on one page, so that in the future, when people go to apply for sign permits, we have it all right in one spot. Jason did provide seating numbers for the bar and restaurant. We also received a statement from the developer indicating that the WXYZ bar and restaurant would not be open to the public. That was one of the big question items that we had at the last meeting. It's also provided some additional calculations for parking based on the added seating numbers for the bar restaurant. He gave us revisions to the vicinity map that had some old information on it, and that was all updated. And they also provided a table of uses and associated floor areas on sheet C201, which is the site layout plan, which we appreciate. So I just wanted to show the signage. So we have one of the PUD benefits that the applicant is requesting is the building height, which would be 60 feet total, including some signage on the Aloft side. And so just to note that staff is comfortable with the proposed building height and signage detail. I think if we had to compare this proposal to the other hotels in the area, we would find some similar building heights exceeding 35 feet or 3 stories, which is pretty much the norm for hotels. The revised facade materials that were provided to us in the architectural elevation drawings provide for decorative cement panels. So it would be that or a decorative metal panel. And so we met with the applicant last week, like shortly after I put out my staff report. And we had a discussion about what these cement panels are. And so it was explained that the decorative fiber cement panels are not the same as the tilt-up cement panels, which is what the ordinance identifies as being discouraged. So that was noted in my report. And then the other material, ACM or aluminum composite material panel, is also acceptable. So we appreciate those facade revisions. They got rid of the EFS, so that's good. So we have a number of items that unfortunately still need to be addressed. So in my report, I have a numbered list that indicates each of these items. So one of the items is the trees to remain, the note on the landscaping plan. We still need to see that because there are some street trees that are existing in the right of way. And if those are proposed to stay as they are, then the note should reflect that. And we still need to see some, see the retaining walls, the retaining wall details to be sealed by an engineer. And we'd also like to see that detail situated in the plan set next to the other details. We also asked for floor areas to be added within the building footprint for the bar and restaurant areas. Jason provided a table of floor areas that coincide with uses, which is helpful, but we wanted to see it broken out on the site plan and within the building footprint, just like the mechanical room, the fitness room, the pool, etc. We also would like to see the parcel split or the proposed parcel split shown on sheet G001A, which is the cover sheet. One of the areas that I failed to see the first time around was that the hotel as proposed does not provide for any loading areas. So something like a hotel is going to be receiving deliveries, especially one that has a bar restaurant in it. They'll be receiving deliveries from beverage distributors, food distributors, linens, and maybe a few others, but those are just a few that I know for sure would get delivered to a hotel. So we don't have any specified loading zones on the plan. And it's important to have those identified so that any loading, unloading that is occurring is not blocking any of those drive aisles and is also not taking up any of the parking spaces, because obviously parking, which we'll get into in a minute, is kind of a hot button item with this site. So we also saw that the ground mount sign was proposed in a public water easement. We'll need to have that moved. The building footprint dimensions, all the building face dimensions, the outside dimensions of the building were provided, with the exception of the western facing building dimension. So we'll need that, and we need it to be on the site plan, which is sheet C201. So the parking numbers, again, the applicant is requesting a reduction of 51 spaces as the plan in front of you shows. And that's a parking reduction of 20%. So, like I mentioned, the things that I just went through in the previous slide, these are all manageable issues. And I think that after discussing these items with the applicant last week, I feel like these can easily be addressed in a revised plan. Thing that remains, though, and we discussed this at length, is the parking numbers. So, when I discussed this issue with the applicant last week, because I gave him a heads up that I would be recommending that the Planning Commission table this item, he just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page. So we agreed to meet with him. He was kind of asking for like, what is a good number? What would the planning commission accept? What would be acceptable to the city? And I said, I can't commit to anything. I don't have an answer for that. The real answer to that question is, what would the parking numbers that would meet the code, which is 258 parking spaces. So just a couple of things here to consider. The parcel is within a commercial planned unit development, so that gives an automatic built-in flexibility. So PUD benefits can be requested when evidence can be provided that such a benefit is warranted or justified. And so my question is, can a 20% reduction in parking be justified based on the information that was provided to us? Is there a better solution other than approving such a significant reduction in parking? And one thing that I've thought about over and over is, what if all these three uses, the hotels, the bar and restaurant, and all three of the conference areas, what if they're all at full capacity? Are we going to have enough parking if that's the case? And what if the hotel property changes hands and opens the bar restaurant to the public under different ownership? So again, this issue is unresolved as it stands tonight. The applicant has indicated with a written statement that WXYZ bar and restaurant will not be open to the public. Even though we have a written statement on that, I still have some reservation based on the conversations I've had with Jason from Fishbeck in terms of, it's not like anybody's going to be there checking IDs to make sure somebody's staying at the hotel or attending a conference. So there's still a lot of questions that are surrounding that statement. And they did provide seating numbers, so that was helpful. But it just caused the parking numbers on the plan or the parking requirements to increase. So the parking numbers on the plan have not changed. They're still requesting 207 parking spaces. But the requirement went up when you add the WXYZ parking as a separate use. The applicant is pretty adamant that all three of the uses will be shared among the hotel guests and that parking numbers provided are based on this shared use. But one thing that we can't predict or indicate at this point in time is there enough parking if the hotel guests are separate from conference attendees and people coming into the bar or restaurant. The required parking, again, is based on full occupancy. We always require parking to prevent issues if they're in the event that an establishment is at full occupancy. And then, as I mentioned, we met with the applicant and we discussed some different options, and it sounds like they're willing to add more parking spaces to the site, but it's still pretty limited and it's still not very many spaces. So again, other options to consider. This is one of the things that we did not talk about. But if you look at some of the pedestrian plaza type areas, I'll go back to this, site plan, areas such as in front of the Towneplace Suites hotel, the entrance, and then there's a very large foyer type, or not foyer, but plaza type entrance out here. It looks like it's for pedestrian use only. You know, I can't, I'm not a civil engineer and I'm not an architect, but it seems like parking could be added here if we reduce some of these areas, and parking could be added here. You know, I think modifying the building footprint is probably the last resort, because that obviously has a ripple effect on everything else. But you know, if the building footprint is modified and these areas are pushed to the west, you could create an opening here for added parking. And so another option to explore would be for the developer to acquire some additional land from within the Meyer PUD. I know the grade here is not super favorable, but you know, I've seen areas that have a stairway down to a lower parking lot at a lower elevation. And so I feel like that's an option too. One thing that we have talked about was shared parking agreements. Again, the developer owns this hotel here. There could be potential for shared parking if that conversation is had with other adjacent property owners. That could be a solution too. And so my recommendation, again, unfortunately, is that the Planning Commission table any action on this plan until the applicant can provide the FASP items that were requested. And one of those is parking, showing us that there can be adequate parking. A parking reduction could be requested as a PUD benefit, but again, it has to be justified. And our city engineer, Scott Connors, has some additional comments that would also lead to my decision to ask the Planning Commission to table this item.
Okay, thank you, Tricia. With that as an introduction, planning commissioners, any questions or comments for Tricia at this point?
Tom, you have to hit *6 to unmute your phone.
Okay. Now, there are no questions for Tricia at this point. Could we move to city engineer Scott Connors and kind of bring us up to state?
Thanks, Terry. I'll go through my report pretty quick. I think you're starting to get familiar with, you know, if we have a tabled project, what I'll do is I'll take my original memo so we don't lose sight of some of those items and then add the comments in red so that you can kind of keep your eye on the whole picture. So if you look at the first two items, pretty easy to resolve. The first one just needed to have some critical names updated on some sheets. That's been done. The second item was with a driveway change to make sure that the Holton Court driveway matches our standards. That's been done. We needed some changes to the ADA, the truncated domes, the ADA compliance there. Fishbeck's plans do show that, but the Bosch plans do not. As you know, these are the plans are introduced as one unit, so you know we want to make sure they're consistent. They don't contradict each other. The next item talked about fill, and we had pointed out that there's as much as 20 feet of fill on some areas of the site that's going to have to be removed. I got kind of conflicting reports on whether you guys had really talked about that last time, but it's, you know, it's still a valid concern for you to talk about in terms of, is there someplace on the site that it's going to go? If it's not, if it's going to go off site, you know, it can be important locally to know where that's going to go because it creates a lot of truck movements. When the gas station was built, you might remember that a truck went through there and knocked down our mast arm signal, our brand new mast arm, about a month after it was installed. So we're a little sensitive there. So that's certainly a topic that you can discuss. There's also a comment there about stormwater, just to point out that the stormwater goes in several different locations here. We can confirm that during the stormwater permit process, if and when this moves forward. There's also going to have to be some cleaning, we think, to the northeast. The pond over by Baymont is full of a lot of material, a lot of garbage and debris and things like that. So that's certainly going to have to be a part of working forward on that. The next item deals with the retaining wall, and the wall that was shown last time was kind of dramatically undersized. It was 11 or 11 and a half feet tall, and we knew that this wall was going to get up into the neighborhood of 22 feet. And that's a pretty big difference when you start talking about structurally what has to be done to preserve the neighbor's property and protect people at the bottom as well. So for, we're protecting, property, but we're also looking at the safety, and we want to make sure that that's taken care of. The detail has been updated, but the detail is shown on one of the Bosch plan sheets that has not been sealed. So the way that this came together is a little bit unique in that, there's two different firms, professional firms, but there's only one professional that sealed it. So either Bosch would have to seal those plan sheets, or as the applicant's suggesting, they would get it sealed later by a material supplier. And that's, again, a little bit unique. We kind of like to know at this point that what we're dealing with is something that's been safe and certified. But at any rate, we make sure that we ask you to have a condition that be sealed by a professional before any building permits could be issued. And I did see a note on the plan. There's two different potential solutions there. One is pretty much a straight wall with some concrete panels. The other would be a terraced solution. If you get into a terraced solution, that means that there's essentially big steps in the wall, which takes more space than a straight up and down wall. So that creates some difficulties maybe with grading, and hopefully it wouldn't impact parking. Obviously parking's very, very critical here. So it's hard to come up with a wall that has a wide footprint like a terraced solution. But you can certainly ask more about that if you desire. Next item talked about a hose bib that was going to be shown near the dumpsters. I think nationally this is becoming kind of a cool thing that you can go wash your dumpster pads out every day. But in states, certainly here in the Great Lakes, our Department of Environmental Quality, now called Eagle, really doesn't like those. In fact, they told us we can't even put those things in unless there's a special storm outlet that goes to the sanitary sewer, because they don't want the dumpsters to be cleaned out every day and all that stuff washed down into the storm system. They would consider that an illicit discharge. So the good news is that's been removed. The hydrants on the north side of the building, there were some issues with those because they were very long public easements. We should have caught this, or I should have caught this the last time around. I think that when we did the site plan review for this project, I was curled up in a blanket in my basement, suffering from COVID. So I had a tad bit of brain fog, and we didn't catch this, but luckily we did catch it now. But what that's done is it's opened Pandora's box on a couple of other things, because when I contacted Grand Rapids, they said, you're right, there's no way we're going to allow that. That led to the fact that there was an original, what's called a preliminary utility plan, which is kind of like the master layout for utilities for this planned unit development. And that called for water main running down the private road that goes north-south just west of the hotels and behind the gas station. And the purpose for that is to make sure that there's redundancy in the water system. It's a loop network to make sure there's hydrants out there for public safety, not just for the buildings, but for vehicles in the road, for the back of the buildings, and to make sure that there's, again, redundant flow in all those hydrants. So we beat that around over the last 3 or 4 days, and finally Grand Rapids talked to me today about that, and we decided that we just can't waive that at staff level. We really need to see that change incorporated. And there were a number of emails back and forth today. In fact, since we wrote this report, we've probably had no less than 20 emails back and forth about various issues with Tricia and myself and the team. And so there were some sketches that were passed back and forth, but it's difficult for us to keep drafting the reports again, bring you a series of all new things. And so we haven't tried to do that. In fact, I'm probably a few behind on the emails, because as I looked, there's a few more between the time I had dinner and here we are. So that's an issue that's going to have to be worked out. I think the good news is that the correct solution with running water main down that private drive is going to provide public hydrants in a manner that's going to provide a little bit more safety, fire protection for the building, which is what fire department ultimately wants. They want to know when they pull their truck in, they could hook up immediately. They know right where it is, and then they can drag lines to the building from there. And I think that's going to be the solution that's going to be best for them. So we think that that'll be okay with them as well. And so the last item that I had down there, talking about removal limits and pavement sections in Holton Court, that goes away because there's not going to be a water main, a water service extension across the road, but there will be a water main connection there. So again, we'll have to have that stuff drawn up so that we make sure we get the right pavement cross section so that it's the right width and it's not real choppy, the curb's protected, and all those kinds of things. So those are the items in my report. I mean, maybe one other thing, that I helped Trish out with a little bit with the parking is that we did see some places on the site, like Tricia pointed out, to add some parking. Certainly can support that. And I think as we talked about this, at staff level with the developer, we kind of agreed this was one of those common sayings that we use about a certain amount of pounds. I think we said 7 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. And, one of the solutions that you have to consider is that you just need a bigger bag. And, if they had to extend some property lines, if they had to knock out some things like some pedestrian ways or something like that, if they need this square footage, then those options need to be on the table in order to achieve the right amount of parking. So I can help out Tricia, back her up, I suppose, with some of those comments as necessary throughout the discussion. And that's it, unless there's any questions.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott at this point? It sounded like, especially with regard to the water main issues, that the closer you look at it, there's more implications for the overall site. It's good to catch that, but when you have a plan that has a lot of deficiencies up front, it's hard to pick up all that detail at the first go. So I think that's probably entering in on this conversation.
Yeah, I apologize for not catching that the first time, folks, but a little slip.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions there, we'll provide an opportunity for the developer. Jason, if you're taking the lead on that, if you could introduce your information and introduce anyone else in your team that would be speaking this evening.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'm Jason Vander, Kodde with Fishbeck, a civil engineer project manager. I have with us tonight Beth Johnson from Bosch, as well as the ownership group, Matt and Cardo, and then the construction company, Dennis and Laura. So our full team is here tonight in order to answer any questions that you may have relating to anything on the project. I appreciate the thorough overview by Tricia and Scott. They've done a nice job of summarizing the progress in the project over the last couple of months. And just a couple of those items that I'd like to respond to and provide a little more information, if I may, from the developer's perspective. We have been working diligently with staff, as they mentioned, over the last several weeks here since the holidays. And we have, after going through an hour and a half meeting with them, come to an agreeable resolution on a majority of those points. At this point, from our perspective, those items are going to be handled. There's a lot of graphics, some labeling, a few formatting issues, just in how the city wants to see this particular set of documents. We do have all the checklist items present. They just may not be in the right places or labeled the way the city prefers. And so we've agreed to update our drawing set to accommodate those changes. What it really boils down to for us at this point is the parking question. The water main question, as Scott alluded to, we've got several emails going back and forth. I've personally been involved in 4 of them today. In the 4th email, I believe we've resolved the water main placement, the hydrant placement, and the fire suppression service to the building. We still need to get the fire chief's final buy-in on that, but I think that we're there, or if we're not there, we're for sure around the 4th turn and headed towards the finish line on that one. So from our perspective, there's just the shared parking question. And we've been working diligently with Scott and Tricia. Two things I'd like to add to the conversation is we did provide to the city documentation from Experience Grand Rapids, and that indicates that in Kent County, hotels on average right now in 2019, before the pandemic hit, we're running about 65% occupied. And so what that does is it gives the city a good gauge for what our typical parking needs are, and the likelihood of us being fully occupied with the conference and with the bar and restaurant seated from outside the hotel, in our opinion as an applicant, is zero. We just don't anticipate that ever. But what we did do is provide documentation showing that a typical hotel occupancy rate is 65%. And what that means is out of our 158 spaces that we only have to have 103 under normal conditions. So under normal conditions, we automatically have 55 extra spaces in our lot that are sitting there empty that we're having to construct and pay for stormwater management on. So that's one piece of information I wanted to add to the conversation. The other piece is that we did provide 12 extra spaces in areas that were different than what Tricia and Scott had come up with. And so between those two, I'm pretty confident that we can get to 228 parking spaces, which is what the requirement of the ordinance is, not including the restaurant and bar service area. So if you look at just the hotel rooms and the conference center rooms, our parking requirement is 228 spaces. And I'm confident that we can get to that number for the commission if that's considered acceptable. The real question on the table for us tonight, and what we would like to get some conversation and some input from the Planning Commission, is the necessity of adding parking spaces for a hotel, restaurant, and bar that's going to be private, and that's going to be intended for the conference center and for the hotel residents, not intended for outside service. And so for us as an applicant, having to add 30 to 35 parking spaces to our site for restaurant use that we're not anticipating having to park for is problematic. So that's why we wanted to present it to you folks tonight, and to get your understanding and collectively agree what shared parking means at this site. From what Tricia's perspective is, shared parking is difficult because it puts you in a position where you may have a deficiency if all of the uses are parked out at once. And from our position, we would really request shared parking specifically for the bar and restaurant, because we don't anticipate that to be outside use ever. So somewhere in between those two, I think there's probably going to be a right answer. And we're hoping to get some conversation with the Planning Commission in order to accomplish that tonight. So that's my question. If we can get through that question together, I think that we are in a great position to be able to give Scott and Tricia and others what they need on the documents, and don't really need to come in front of the Planning Commission again to talk through everything that we've already provided to them as we agreed to. So if we can do that together, we would request a conditional approval, and happy to accept the conditions that Tricia and Scott laid out tonight. We've talked through the documents with them in a meeting, and we have a good understanding of what needs to be added and where it needs to be placed in order to accommodate those revisions. Beth, is there anything that you'd like to add on the parking, or should we open it up to questions at this time or conversation?
No, I think you did a great job at explaining our situation and where we stand at it.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Chair, I yield the floor back, and we would love to talk about XYZ parking.
Terry, you're muted.
You're still on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions of Jason of his comments just offered right now? Comments, questions? In this case, I wanted to give an opportunity before we get into more discussion of if there's any other comments from the public. I don't know if we've got anybody here that has questions or comments concerning this project. Provide opportunity for public comment. Again, indicate that you'd like to speak by raising your hand virtually or on screen, and we can go forward from there.
Can I talk to?
Okay, this is Gentleman by the name of Matt.
Yes, Matt Piromari.
Okay.
I am one of the owner. I'd like to introduce myself, and also just to let you know, I have 18 more hotel in Grand Rapids. I work with all the city. Even if your engineering or city do not catch anything for tonight, after a week or 2 weeks, they can come. I always work with all city, like a partner, brother to brother. I will add it. I have no problem. I know this meeting is a recording. I can be responsible for my wording. I can add anything, guys, you needed. Just I need to add another point. It was a good news today. It's Experience Grand Rapids make a big deal, like congratulating. I got 3 Platinum Award for 2019 for Marriott. This is a high-class hotel. This is not like low-class hotel. And this restaurant is not for the outside people. It's for my guests. I will not make like people come to there to party to bother my guests, because anybody in hotel business, 99% people lose money if they have restaurant inside in the hotel. I look at the guest room. My whole point, all my hotel, I don't like a full service hotel because we lose money for the restaurant, be honest with you. But this is only for my guests. I will not bring guests outside to bother my people. Later, my guests will complain and I will not get gold award or I will not be like a member for Marriott, because you cannot be easy to be a member for Marriott. You have to have a lot of experience. They will ask you your history. You have to fly there to interview you like 8 hours. After that, they can give you that flag. And those 2 Towneplace in town, both is mine too. I have like a 4 or 5 hotel Marriott. I have all the flag, the high flag in United States. Also, I have in Kent County too, Hyatt Place I'm building too. And Cascade area, I have a multiple build it. So far, I built it 8 hotel in Grand Rapids area. I will work with you guys. Anything you're adding soon or later, I'm willing to work with you.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Yes, appreciate that.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would wish to offer comment or question? Seeing none, go back to commission discussion. It does appear that parking is a primary issue. And we have the water main issue there that it appears to be in process as far as resolving it. Obviously not complete at this point in time. Scott did also comment that with regard to the retaining wall, that a condition at the very least would have to be assigned to that it be a sealed plan presented to the city before the issuance of the building permit on the project. Any comments as far as on how to address the parking deficiency, the request for a PUD benefit? Tom, if you could star 6. Jason,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I was just.
there you go.
Okay, I got a little technical issue here. I got real heartburn here with this restaurant thing. When I look all around the country, this place is advertised to the public for food and entertainment. You can have a letter that says, oh, we won't let outside people come in, but we're going to send a cop there to enforce it. That restaurant goes away, solves a lot of parking issues. If the hotels are only 65% occupied, Get rid of 25% of the rooms. The hotel won't be full. That'll solve some parking issues. I'm really a little concerned that we got all these loose ends at this plan again. And I agree with staff that it needs to be tabled until these issues are all ironed out.
Thank you, Tom.
Can I say something here?
Right now, we're in commission discussion.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Hey, Terry, this is Pat Laurie.
Okay, Pat.
In tagging onto Tom's comments, yeah, I agree with Tom on most of his points. I do like that the developer is looking at ways to increase the parking up from, to 228, and I kind of understand some of the reasoning. And like Tom said, if these hotels are at 65%, is there another way? I mean, take a layer off the hotel. Does it have to be that tall? I mean, these kinds of things to try to make sure. And all the other hotels that they've built, have they been this short on parking spaces, or have they all been, bigger pieces of property that they place the building and have plenty of parking? So these are all things to consider. But, like Trish's comments that, I mean, what if this hotel changes hands and they change and, the restaurant becomes a popular destination, these kinds of things. So we really need to make sure that there's enough parking. The 228 is getting close. I think they're almost there. I mean, they got to get another 30. I'd be okay if they got another 15 to 20, but parking is important. If they're not going to work with the Baymont, and try to do some share parking there, which they may actually have more parking they can use. But so that's my comments.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone else?
Terry?
Yeah,
Terry?
Tyler.
Tyler. I would just piggyback off both of those and agree with them. So.
Joe.
Joe, yeah, I support the staff on this. I'm no expert on parking at all, but I think that our staff is right up on, every time I come to this meeting, I'm amazed at the details you guys have, and I'm impressed with you all the time. So I defer this to the staff, what they want to work out.
Mr. Chair, this is Scott, and yeah, I'm just going to echo everybody else's comments. There's just too many loose ends that need to be addressed and finalized. I appreciate and am encouraged by the emails that have been going back and forth that seem to be solidifying a lot of the things, especially with the water main. But I'd just like to see those more solidified. And just again, the issue with the parking, I'll echo everybody else's comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I think that if they get a little more creative in terms of some of the ways that they're parking, they can really increase this quite a bit. I don't necessarily know that they'll get to everything that we're requiring, but I think a little bit more is definitely the direction. The other thing that was brought up by Tricia earlier that I'd like to at least see addressed is how is the loading or the anything that has to do with the food service, back of house kind of things. Where is that happening? How is that happening? Because on the drawings, it's not showing any of that, and we would kind of want to know how that happens. Very similar to what a dumpster or one of those kinds of things would be. So I'd look for some of that, and really the reasoning for me too is the same. If this changes hands, or if someday they do decide that it's going to open to the public for the bar, restaurant, any of those kinds of things, I think we need to make sure that we can at least adequately park around here, and then doing some shared agreement with the neighboring property is not a bad thing either. So I think there's ways to get it quite a bit closer. But I would say though, I really do like the project. I think it's great. I think the location is good. I don't have any negative things to say in terms of the project. It only would be positive. There's just a couple details that need to get, kind of tuned in, and would certainly have a much better comfort level there. So that's all from my side.
Thanks, Jason. Jason, with FTC and H, the loading issue that's been raised, what is the detail on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer that question. So when we met with staff last Friday, we identified 3 loading zone locations on the drawing, which would meet your 10-foot by 40-foot space requirement. One of them is going to be to the west of the conference center, adjacent to the sidewalk. And then 2 of them are going to be adjacent to the building on the east side, near the service area by the mechanical room and by the Towneplace building. And what we're going to do is we're going to assign 3 of the parking spaces adjacent to those loading zones as for employees only. And so those particular loading zones will not be blocking our guests. They will only be inconveniencing the staff of the hotel. And should we have to move a vehicle or move a vehicle that's in the loading zone, we'll be able to quickly contact the correct individual with the keys to that vehicle in order to make the shuffle. So we will have 3 loading zones on the site, 1 for each hotel and 1 for the conference center. And we've identified locations that those will be shown on the drawing once it's resubmitted.
Hey, Terry, it's probably worth pointing out to make sure there's no issue with that. I think those loading zones would be in the drive aisle. So if there's anybody that has a problem with that, they should bring that up now so that doesn't turn into an issue next time.
Yes, those will be taking up a portion of the drive aisle. So that is something worth raising. In the event that the drive aisle is a concern for somebody, we have an alternate location over by the dumpsters, but it's a lot further from the building and a lot less convenient for the deliveries and a lot more problematic for us to enforce as well. So we do have a plan B in place, but we would much prefer plan A, and we'll be happy to operate the hotel in order to accommodate our guests and our deliveries and try to run a smooth operation there, as Matt has received awards for doing on his other hotels.
In terms of the loading options, whether it's their primary one or the secondary one by the dumpster area, from a staff perspective, concerned with that with regard to the partial usage of the drive aisle? Scott, Tricia?
Jason showed some sort of preliminary areas that he thought could be appropriate for loading. I can't really, without seeing it on the plan, and scaled out appropriately, I can't really say at this point whether or not the areas that he described would work. So it just needs to be shown on the plan so that we can review, and then we'd have a better idea whether or not those areas will work or not.
So for me, Terry, I mean, in the drive aisle is really the last resort. We don't want to see that. Tom can probably chime in too from his engineering background. It's not what you want to see because you end up with one-way traffic essentially. But they don't have any room for anything significant like a truck that's making, significant deliveries. Again, it gets back to there's just a lot of stuff going on a small site, and they have to find a solution.
I agree totally with Scott, and we need to see this on a plan and have a good look at these loading zones to make sure they work. I get a little concerned about, car employees are going to be parked in them. The beer truck drivers got to go find somebody to move a car. Yeah, I got a little heartburn. I think we need to see revised plans.
Well, with respect to the loading and also in terms of the parking, Jason with the development group has indicated they've got, they feel that they could add 12 spaces to the plan. Tricia, I think, laid out some, look like several different areas that sound like she and Scott kind of looked over that are currently not designated for parking, but they're hard surfaced area generally, and the potential for those to be used as parking spaces. I think that's perhaps part of the solution. And I think, as Tricia pointed out as well, as far as parcel 2 on this plan, or phase 2, phase 2 did not, they're taking up a portion of that phase 2 property. So that it would appear to be some potential for additional purchase to the south side of the site to supplement your parking there. So you've got that as an option, reworking some of the hard surfaced areas so that they could be designated and used for parking, converted over. Or I don't know how those overlap perhaps with the 12 spaces that Jason has identified. So there appears to be a potential to perhaps give some relief to the 51 spaces, but I can appreciate staff was saying that we can't tell you what that is at this juncture. They wanted to have the Planning Commission's input. I'm sensing from our comments that that needs to be resolved. Whether it's 51 spaces, I don't get the impression we necessarily have to go to the full extent, but a greater extent than what is shown on the plan right now for 207 spaces. Looking back at the amount of time that's been spent since this was tabled until the meeting tonight, it is very disappointing and frustrating for, I think, the Planning Commission to have these items still pending. So we're left with a decision here to approve the project, approve it with conditions, table the project, or turn it down. I think that it's been noted, and I think I am in agreement with it. It's a good project. It should go forward, but we need to get this, the parking, water main, and the loading and the sealing of the a professional seal on the retaining wall detail at the very least to go forward to give a conditional approval. That's my perspective on it. Do we have anyone that would wish to offer a motion to table at this point in time?
I'll make the motion to table it.
Second.
Motion by Tom, supported by Joe to table the request. And again, just as we did last time, we wanted to pick a date certain on this. What is the next Planning Commission meeting date?
Muted, Tricia.
February 3rd.
How's our agenda look for that evening?
We have 2 items on that agenda. So I don't know how quickly you'd be able to turn this around, Jason. Obviously we need time to review before we can write any reports. So my packet for the Planning Commission meeting would go out on the 28th, which is next Thursday. So it might be cutting it kind of close.
Yeah, from a revision perspective, Tricia, I don't think it's going to take us a whole lot of time. We have good direction from our meeting a week ago. Most of the information is graphic in nature, and I'm confident that we could get you something for sure early next week, possibly even the end of this week if we absolutely had to. But I would think early next week would certainly be something we could accomplish if the Planning Commission would accept that.
What we won't be doing this time around, though, is reviewing your plans, giving you additional feedback, and then waiting for you to resubmit, because there's just not enough time.
And we haven't done that in the past either. We've only submitted once for each.
We did that with the last submittal. So I gave you some initial feedback. Remember when I asked you to only give me 2 sets of plans?
Yes.
And then I said, let me give you some initial feedback, because I'm quite sure there's probably going to be some items that need to be corrected. So we won't have time to allow for that this time around.
Given that crunch, I'm going to send over a couple notes about parking, because I think I'm concerned the more green space we lose, a heavy winter becomes really difficult. So making sure that some of that's preserved for some snow storage and making sure that you maximize parking at the same time is going to be challenging. So I got a couple notes I'm going to send over, because as Tricia said, we won't have any time for interaction back and forth once those plans are submitted. We have lots of stuff going on at once. We can't just kind of focus and say, okay, this day we're going to dedicate a whole day to it. It's got to fit within a whole bunch of other tasks. So hopefully we can make it work.
I also have concern about the shared parking at the Baymont. If that place is at full occupancy, do they have any extra room?
Yeah, we're not proposing shared parking with Baymont at this time, Tom. That was an option for us to consider, but at this point in time, that's not one that we're looking at. So hopefully that addresses your concern.
I think the turnaround time for the next meeting is too short to get a good review and get good plans that have solved the issues. But that's just my opinion.
Well, we've got looks like we could tee this up for a tabling. I look to whoever makes the motion as to whether to schedule it for February 3 or February 17.
I mean, honestly, it would really be helpful if it could be on the 17th.
Then I amend my motion to table it to the February 17th meeting.
I second that too.
We'll have no difficulty achieving either meeting. We can still do the 3rd.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor to table the request to February 17. Again, by roll call vote, if we could, those in favor and those against that request. Tricia, if you could call the roll.
Yep. Pat?
Yes.
Tyler?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes. Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, the motion carries to table this to February 17. Really encourage working these things through as soon as possible, and so that we have this resolved and go forward with a project that would surely be a benefit to the community. One other thing I'd like to add on here is through these conversations, we've talked about XYZ bar serving alcohol. I understand that the city of Walker has a process to go through to make application for that, even if you're bringing in your own license from outside, going through that review process. I would encourage the development group to really take a look at that and dig into it, because sounds like the request going to the city commission would be to secure or operate with a liquor license there with no, not being open to the public. And it would be best for all concerned to have that conversation with the city before too long to make sure that that will be acceptable to all parties.
Noted. Thank you very much, Commission, for your time and your input tonight. We greatly appreciate the dialogue, and we look forward to submitting a third complete package to Trish and the team for review and hopefully recommendation for approval on the next go around. So thank you.
Okay, moving along. The next item is election of officers, chair, vice chair, and secretary. Tricia pointed out that we're 2 members short this evening. So we have the option of going ahead with the election this evening, or we could defer it until the next.
I'm fine with going ahead with it. I would nominate Terry for chair and Jason for secretary.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other nominations? Okay.
Nominate Tyler for co-chair.
We have nomination for Tyler for co-chair.
Vice chair, guys.
Oh,
Vice chair.
Okay. And
Unless you want to share it, you can do that, but I don't think that's in the bylaws.
No.
All right, sorry.
Tom did his homework.
There any other
And they're
nominations?
done that, rode that pony.
Being no other nominations, the sum total is, if there's an interest in retaining myself as chair, Tyler as vice chair, and Jason as secretary, go through a roll call vote for yes or no.
Okay. Pat,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Terry,
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got a lot of work ahead in the upcoming year. Any other business to discuss?
Just one point on the February 17 meeting, I won't be available for that.
Okay. All right.
I just have a couple updates. The upcoming meeting, we have an industrial PUD. They're asking for a PASP review. And then our Silhouettes mortuary is asking for site plan approval for an accessory building on their existing lot. And then the English Hills piece is they finally submitted their application for the multifamily development there. And we also got an application for Starbucks that is being proposed to the east of the Chick-fil-A parcel.
Is it worth pointing out also, Tricia, there's 3 meetings in February, just so they can mark their calendars, or do they know that?
Yeah, so as you know, that we have pushed out thank you, Scott. We pushed out the Waterford Village public hearing to tentatively be on February 24th. And so we hopefully will be able to hold that meeting. I think it's still very important to Frank and others to hold that meeting in person. So we'll see what the health department orders say at that time. Did you have any other dates, Scott, that you had in mind, or was that?
No, I just thought, for my schedule, I always try to plan these things out. And I suppose everybody else does too. It rings in your head over years, first and third Wednesday, right? And then all of a sudden a meeting on the fourth Wednesday pops up and you just got to mark it down.
Yep. So I'll definitely send you a meeting invite through Outlook when we get closer to being able to nail that date down.
That'll be appreciated. Thank you.
When Jason said he wasn't going to be there, he reminded me, he's our expert on these surfaces. Do we want some perspectives, what this hotel is going to look like with these metal panels and stuff, and that concrete surface that they proposed? I mean, they showed us buildings that really aren't hotels.
So I've actually built hotels with both the metal panel and the fiber cement, and they both look really nice. I think in this particular situation, they'll be nice in this
Okay, I looked at what they showed us and it's like, yeah, I don't think they're going to put this up here, but the colors weren't what I thought was hotel.
That's the chain groups. You can't
You
can't mess with it too much. Let's put it that way. They can
Okay.
change it a little bit, but no, both products are nice. The cement board is going to take a little more maintenance than what the architectural metal panel will be. Other than that, there's
Okay.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. I think we're done for the night. Thank you very much.
Thank
Hey,
you.
guys. Trish.
Thanks,
See you,
everyone.
bye.